It's 2025, a new year and the best time to turn your great idea into a business. Shopify is how you're going to make it happen. Let me tell you how. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. Get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. All you need to do is drag and drop. Their powerful social media tools let you connect all your channels and create shoppable posts. Established in 2025. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/promo.
This episode of The Price of Football is supported by International Sports Convention 2025, which is taking place on March the 19th and 20th at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. More than 1,000 delegates and 100 speakers will be attending the event, and they will be covering a huge range of topics, from sponsorship and fan engagement to governance and integrity. Founded in 2009, International Sports Convention is the meeting place for the business of sport and has been for the last 16 years.
And there's a special treat for those lucky enough to attend the 2025 edition. The two of us will also be appearing. We'll be having a chat about football finance and governance in front of a live audience. You can book your place now at a special early offer price by going to internationalsportsconvention.com. But don't delay, that special early offer price is only available until the 20th of February.
Book your place now for International Sports Convention 2025 at Spurs Stadium on the 19th and 20th of March by going to internationalsportsconvention.com, and hopefully we'll see you there.
Average is not invited. Not if you're holding your company off-site in Las Vegas. We aren't on friendly terms with the bare minimum, and unenthusiastic is uninvited. Las Vegas's creative energy and world-class hospitality want to bring your company off-site to crazy new heights. That's why fear-based leadership is afraid of Vegas, and boring won't be there, but it will be watching the meeting recordings later. Plan for the extraordinary at vegasmeansbusiness.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. And if I sound a bit excited, it's because I can see Kieran's in his new flat in Liverpool, and there's a picture on the wall, Kieran. It's been promoted from propped up against the table to on the wall, right in the corner by the little fan lights. It looks very artistic. Kieran. It looks like a
It's like a modern 3 weeks. Don't take me 3 weeks. That's it. Never mind Nick Knowles.
Let's not talk about Nick Knowles until we're off here. But you've the Lawrence Bassini of show business. But you've hung that picture in such a way it looks like a modern art gallery in somewhere in East London, Kieran. It's just there's a whole blank wall, and then you've put the picture right in, and it looks great. It looks really good. The Baroness will be so excited when she sees that progress you made.
Yes.
Kieran, here we are. It's Newsday. It's our fourth pod of the week here. I don't know how professional footballers do it. I mean, they get 2 or 3 days off, Kieran. We've had 2 sleeps between 3 pods on Monday. And I'm beginning to regret booking that 6-week pre-season tour of Southeast Asia with a podcast every night, Kieran. What were we thinking? And do you remember in the old days, Kieran, doing this pod? We'd start off with an aperitif of Crawley Town, and then move on. There'd probably be a Derby County story, and then maybe the main story would be the National League, 3 up, 3 down, who knows? And now our first 2 stories are Manchester United, and our second 2 stories are the Premier League. Which is maybe an indication that things are levelling out, because things are just as bad at the top as they are at the bottom. But yeah, we spoke to Kevin Miles, CEO of the Football Supporters Association, who told us how much contact they're getting from Manchester United fans. And again, this week, more redundancies on the way by the look of it, Kieran.
Yes, this is a story which has not yet been confirmed by the club, it has to be said. But from what I understand, the club has written to staff to say, don't go leaking that we're about to make 100 people redundant.
Yeah.
It might make people unhappy. I think being made redundant is probably the bigger issue in terms of making people happy. It's a classic case of shoot the messenger. So following the initial 250 members of staff being made redundant since Ineos acquired the club just over a year ago, it now looks like they're going to be a second round of redundancies. And there have been some scaremongering stories circulating in the press that the fear is Manchester United could go bust. I want to lay those fears to rest. It is bunkum. I use a series of measures to monitor and assess the strength of football clubs. One of which is EBITDA, one of our very good friends that we've come to know only too well. And this is the cash profit generated by a club. Manchester United make more EBITDA profit than any other club in the Premier League. And why is that important? It's because it's the cash profit generated from day-to-day running of the club. So I think what it is, it's somebody is giving nudge, nudge, wink, wink stories to people in the media. And they say, look, the terrible state of the club's finances, this is why we need to make people redundant. Well, if you then actually start to look at the figures in detail, you say, not only is Manchester United generating more cash profit than anybody else, and then we've got to come to the story of how that cash is being spent, which is a completely separate issue. They also have the third lowest wages to revenue. So for every £100 that Manchester United generates, £55 of that is being spent on wages. Now, we know that in the EFL Championship, the average is £101, and yet none of those clubs are going bust. We're not saying they're in a good financial position, of course, but they're not going bust. UEFA say anything over £70 is not ideal, but not critical. So Manchester United are actually fairly good at wage cost control. And I really want to stress that wage cost control issue. So if they are losing money overall, they must be losing money doing other things. And that is the case. So I went through the finances of all of the Premier League clubs since the inception of the Premier League, but I focused on the period since the retirement of Sir Alex Ferguson. And since then, Manchester United have spent a net £1.5 billion in the transfer market, which is more than any other club. Now, we've always said this is not a football show. But if I go back over the last 12 years, I go, how many good players have Manchester United bought in terms of that net £1.5 billion? Bruno Fernandes, yeah, great player. You know, he might be a bit sulky at times, but he's a fantastic footballer. And after that, I'm going, well, I'm really struggling. So the problems at Manchester United, it's not caused by Dave and Sarah in the ticket office. It's not caused by scouts. It's not caused by the people in the media department. And it also has to be noted that Manchester United have more employees than any other club in the Premier League, partly due to the fact they've got the biggest stadium. So therefore they need the biggest stadium costs to be covered and dealt with in terms of staffing. It should also be acknowledged, and let's be perfectly candid here, Manchester United is the biggest club in terms of media attention. I would argue, not just in the Premier League, but I would say in the world. It's got a huge following. It itself boasts of having 1.1 billion followers in its own accounts. And therefore, you need a large media department. It's got a very successful commercial department. I know commercial income hasn't gone spectacularly well in the last few years, because they're not winning trophies. And that comes down to the playing side. And there's a symbiotic relationship between the two. You then look at some of the other money which has been spent at Manchester United. You've got the Dan Ashworth debacle. They tried to get him from Newcastle. Newcastle put him on gardening leave. Manchester United wouldn't pay the release fee. Then they negotiated a release fee, which is in the millions. They sack him 5 months later, so therefore there's going to be redundancy payments there. there was a £21.4 million cost of sacking Erik ten Hag, who Ineos had opted to extend his contract a few months earlier. And we know people in the Netherlands, and those people had said Ten Hag was a bit surprised to have. It could have been done over the phone, but 3 Manchester United executives turns up on his holiday home, and they'd arrived on 3 separate private jets. So if Ineos are genuine about cost cutting, then they need to start at the upper levels as well. There has been over £5 million of redundancy paid to executives since Ineos came in. Richard Arnold has gone, Patrick Stewart has gone, and so on. So they seem to be, this is a classic case of penny wise and pound foolish. They have, to quote a former Prime Minister, they have spaffed £1.5 billion net. Remember, that is net in the transfer market over the course of the last 12 years. They have spent money on executives. They paid shareholders £166 million for mediocrity on the pitch in terms of dividends. And then there's the other issue, which, again, it has to come back to our very good friends, the Glazers here. Since 2005, when the Glazers took over the club, the net interest spend is £960 million on a £700 million loan. Those are areas which need addressing. Taking it out on staff, and this comes down to, I think this is, sadly, and I don't want to go down this avenue particularly deeply, this is part of a broader issue in terms of culture wars, anti-wokeism, and so on. And Ratcliffe's view of the world is very much in one particular area here. He views staff as costs rather than people, and that culture, that philosophy, in a people business, and that's what Manchester United are. They're a service business. They're not a petrochemicals company. I think it's poorly thought out. It's been absolutely appallingly handled by Ineos, and again, we know we've had people come up to us after our live shows, former employees of Manchester United, to explain just how things have been handled. It's poor management, certainly by the Glazers, and that's been followed up by Ineos.
Just for new listeners, Kieran, you know me in acronyms. EBITDA, earnings before
interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, i.e. it's the profits if you ignore player trading. Now, why are those profits before player trading turning into a loss afterwards? Buying poor and selling poor.
Yeah. There's no suggestion, Kieran, at least none that I've heard, that any of these redundancies are being handled with anything other than the correct procedure, the right money being offered, and so on and so forth. Which I suppose is one small consolation. But you mentioned Dan Ashworth, Kieran, and this would probably sound naive coming from someone like me who doesn't know finances, but the amount of money his redundancy payoff cost would cover 200 staff being kept on. I would guess, at least for a tour of his. It's just not a good look for Man United fans, and they've spent all that money on players. And yes, I know they had a virus last week, but against Tottenham, every single player on the bench, apart from one, was under the age of 18. So clearly their recruitment strategy isn't working. And another big issue, and I think this is the one that is highlighted most by Kevin Miles from the FSA at Manchester United, is ticket prices. And the Man United Supporters Trust are trying to do something about that.
That's right, and credit to Must. They're caught between two stools here, I think, in terms of listening to fan pressure and the constant narrative that's coming from Ineos that we have to increase prices. Well, this is coming sort of. We're recording this less than 24 hours after Liverpool Football Club announced a price freeze for season tickets, a price freeze for match day tickets, and the maintenance of lower tickets for people within a relatively small radius, a couple of mile radius of Anfield, and £9 tickets available effectively for kids as well. So if you run a club successfully, you don't have to using fans and using staff as easy targets for the incompetence elsewhere in an organisation. I'm going to give something which I've done on very rare occasions. I'm going to give the Glazers some credit here. Manchester United did freeze ticket prices for a period about 9 to 10 years, and they deserve some credit for that. Then that freeze was removed. But must have written, and I absolutely understand where they're coming from. What makes Manchester United such an iconic football club? Well, yes, they've got the legacy of Sir Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson and some of the greatest players ever to have been seen in this country. Absolutely. But it's also the Stretford end, just as it is the Kop in Liverpool.
Yeah.
And if you take Manchester out of the Stretford end by pricing local fans out of being able to attend, then you lose some of the allure, some of the unique magic that one associates with Manchester United. And one way of getting rid of those fans is to continually increase prices. So I think it will be very interesting to see what Manchester United's response is. I think Liverpool have played an absolute blinder here, by the way. First of all, they've negotiated, they've had discussions with the likes of Spirit of Shankly and so on. And they, as a result of that, have frozen their prices. If I was being a little bit, let's just set down a marker. They've now got huge credit with their fan base. How does Ineos respond to that? If Ineos have got any sense, they will match that price freeze. And what they can do instead is that whilst Liverpool have frozen matchday ticket prices and season ticket prices, nothing was mentioned in there about the price of hospitality tickets. So what you do is that you target the corporate sector. And the corporate sector aren't there to watch the football per se. They're there to entertain clients. They're there to backslap each other and so on. And they can afford to pay the higher prices, even though some of the increases in the prices have been quite eye-watering. I was contacted by a Manchester United corporate holder who she was paying £3,600 in 22-23. So that's best part of £200 a match. That £3,600 has gone up to £6,000 this season. Now that's for 19 matches. You're paying well over £300 a match for the privilege to. But she says, or he says, it's a case of use it or lose it. And Manchester United is such a global brand. There's a long queue of corporate clients willing to replace that person. So I suspect that was the direction of travel. And I go back to the comments. I think it was Uli Hoeneß at Bayern Munich. He says, we keep prices low. And I watched the Bayern versus Celtic match last night. It was a great game of football. And, Celtic played really well. But the atmosphere at the ground, at the Alliance Arena, was superb. And what Hoeneß says is that we could make an extra, a couple of million euros a year from increasing season ticket prices and so on. But we want to have the atmosphere because we feel it makes a difference. We feel it helps us in terms of marketing the club and so on. And also, we make as much money from the 6,000 corporate seats as we do from the 55,000 regular seats. And each party acknowledges the benefit and to the greater good of the pricing structure that we have.
I'll tell you what, some of those Bayern fans must have biceps like Popeye after spinach. those banners are heavy. And there wasn't one moment they weren't. We've had people saying to us recently, Kieran, what do you mean the Stretford end will disappear? What do you mean the Holmesdale will disappear? The Couscous end, whatever you have at Brighton, will disappear. Because there's loads of people who want to ticket. This will happen over 10, 15, 20 years. It won't happen in the course of 2 years, but what will happen is that people from Salford and Manchester who can no longer afford their tickets can no longer afford to take their kids to to the game either. So it's that generation that won't be getting their season ticket in the Stretford. It won't. The next couple of years, the Stretford end will be as loud and as noisy as it ever was. So will the Holmesdale, not so much the Couscous end, but obviously at Brighton. But this is not a process. This is a process that will take some time, and it's beginning to happen. And there's no two ways about it beginning to happen. And again, we've often used the phrase once a particular genie's out of the bottle, and that genie's out of the bottle, Kieran. It might be climbing halfway up the bottle, but it's certainly on the way out.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Two Premier League stories, Kieran, the second of which obviously we'll come to after the first. I've learnt a lot doing this pod, Kieran, about the order of things. But the second of which, again, there's a lot of stories gone under the radar recently, and this second one is, I'm not happy about it. But the first one, the Premier League are not having a good time recently, Kieran, and they're delaying something else now. They're the general Custer at the moment, aren't they? They're on top of the hill, surrounded. They're going down at the moment. They're just waiting for the cavalry to arrive, and the cavalry seems to be a long way off at the moment.
Yes, the Premier League have, following the ruling relating to the associated party transaction rules, the Premier League have decided to not introduce the squad cost control rules that exist under UEFA, and not to introduce the other potential cost control measure in the form of anchoring. And the reason for that is, first of all, the Premier League's crushing defeat. And regardless of how the Premier League are trying to paint this, we've been in contact with a couple of sports lawyers, and they are adamant that A, it's a mess, B, it could become a very expensive mess if clubs who were trying to arrange sponsorship and commercial deals with third parties felt that they were delayed, or even the sponsors walked away as a result of the severity of these rules, which restrict investment in the sport. So it could be a very, very expensive exercise for the Premier League. The anchoring, the Professional Footballers Association, it's opposed to that. It sees it as a wage cap, which isn't part of the agreed framework that it has with the Premier League. Again, the Premier League's trying to push back, but I think the Premier League says we've taken so many beatings recently. You think, Leicester. The Leicester ruling was hugely embarrassing for the Premier League to have a club which had played 38 games in that season to be deemed to be not part of the Premier League. And hats off to our good friend Nick DeMarco here, who just waltzed through a threadbare defence, but still stuck it in the back of net. We had the claims against Everton, which I always thought was spurious myself. Well, the Premier League's had to back down on this. And now this APT1, as I think we will refer to it, Manchester City have successfully defended their position with regards to the historic APT rules. Manchester City have a second case going forwards with the new rules introduced in November 2024. And I think until the outcome of that is known, and that's, again, has to be stressed, completely independent of the 115 charges issue, there is little to be gained. So I think the Premier League's, it's read the tea leaves and realises that trying to introduce a new set of rules when we don't know what the core position is in terms of signing commercial deals between football clubs and parties who are not close to, but not completely independent, should we say, of owners is a step too far, and therefore they're pushing back. So the existing PSR rules will exist for 25-26. This will benefit some clubs more than others because you're looking at seasons 23-24 and 24-25 come into the equation. Some clubs have performed better financially than others, but I don't think anybody this June is in a horrendous position going into the summer of 25. I think so many clubs learnt their lessons last June.
This is pure speculation, of course, Kieran, but you can't help but think that if the 115 charges completely exonerate City, then Custer is definitely going down. There's no two ways about it. And to be fair, there are lots of people who know their history who think that Custer deserved to go down. So Yabu sucks. It's not my finest moment, that, Kieran, but I was just trying to find a way of moving on. This next story about the Premier League using a tax scheme, Kieran, let's go no further than that, is one that I can't believe hasn't been more well publicised than it has. I think only one newspaper tried to pick this up and run with it. And this is a story that makes me very uneasy, I have to say, Kieran.
Well, this story was picked up by a podcast called The Price of Football was it 6 or 7 months ago when we had Tony Bogdan on, who is a tax expert, and he took us through it. And it is being utilised. It has to be said, the research and development tax credits legislation is a piece of appallingly drafted tax legislation. And I can't criticise football clubs for taking advantage of a set of rules in exactly the same way as I'm not going to criticise Leicester or Manchester City if they are subsequently, or in terms of their APT claims and so on. This is a piece of legislation which is trying to encourage people to do the right thing. If this country is to be successful economically, then it needs to invest in the future. And how do you invest in the future? You commit yourself to research and development and science and technology, and you make advancements. Because if you don't make advancements, I can assure you other countries will. So the way that it works is if you spend this money, I think we'll give you something like, we'll give you, for every £100 you put in, you'll get a tax credit, which is worth more than that. And it's cost the Treasury last year £7.5 billion in decreased tax receipts, of which football was a tiny, tiny fraction. And I think this story, which was run in the Times, and it is a good question, it's a good piece of investigative journalism, and it deserves to be given to a wider audience. The way that it was framed was the first thing that you saw in the headlines was a picture of Chelsea Football Club. Now, Chelsea Football Club have claimed, I think, around about £2 million of this. Where I think the concern is that the research and development tax credits are given, first of all, for all industries, but they are given specifically for genuine advances in science and technology. Now, that could be Todd Bowley's 4-4-3 formation. Never thought of before. But this is where, but I presume it's to do with sports science. I presume it's to do with the fact that we now are using algorithms, we are using data pools, we are using Moneyball systems, and it can certainly be argued that is sort of some form of tech advancement. But it's got to benefit the overall field. It's got to benefit the overall industry. And the one thing that we know about all of these clubs that have their algorithmic models is that they do not share anything with anyone because they all want to have a competitive edge against each other. So it doesn't look great, but I can assure you these rules are being abused by other entities. And I think there's some tax advisors who are milking the system for their clients. And I'm not saying this is in respect of football. So it's being run as a football story, but it's a much broader issue. And it deserves scrutiny, but HMRC are understaffed. If you're good at HMRC, what will happen is that you will be headhunted by a firm of accountants or a firm of tax advisors, and you're offered a lot more money. So it's actually very difficult for HMRC to police this particular activity well and to act on behalf of the broader taxpayers' concerns.
See, the grey area here, Kieran, and the difficulty for HMRC is that there is a difference between specifically investing in a project and money that you would have spent on that project anyway. So it seems to me that both of those will get you the tax credit in the same way that when I used to work in HR in the ambulance service, because of the levels of unemployment at the time, the government introduced a scheme whereby if you persuaded somebody to take early retirement, you got a certain amount of money towards recruiting the person who they were replaced. So we would claim that money if we persuaded somebody to take early retirement, or whether they took it voluntarily anyway without recourse to us. And the government didn't check. And it seems to me that this is exactly that sort of situation, that clubs shouldn't be getting tax credits unless they can prove that they are specifically investing this particular money in something that will benefit the public good in science. And as you say, they're not sharing the information anyway, so they can't argue that. So there's no, I don't think there's any, it doesn't seem to me reading the article that there's any deliberate attempt. It's not like one of those schemes where actors and comedians were investing in film production. It doesn't seem to me that there's a deliberate attempt to defraud the tax office here, but they are basically exploiting, and it's not even a loophole, but they're exploiting something that exists.
You're absolutely right. If you have a set of rules, those rules have got to be policed. As anybody that's ever submitted a tax return will know, there's an element of good faith by HMRC that you've taken professional advice, or you've completed the data and you've input it correctly, and your tax liability is calculated. There's not 100% auditing in terms of asking every taxpayer for the receipts, and I've got a lot of sympathy for HMRC. I think they've been given a hospital pass by the legislators, and the legislators have walked away from all this. And I've got to stress, the broad intention of these tax rules is laudable. I'm 100% behind them, or 150%. I'll be giving my tax credit behind them, but it is open to abuse, just like financial fair play is open to abuse.
Yeah. I like the fact that you said you were 100% behind them and then seasonally adjusted it, like the top lawyer, top accountant that you are. I can't be 100% behind them. One of the things we learned from Kevin Miles, Kieran, CEO of the FSA, and this is the last time I plugged that interview. This is available today, I believe, for club members, and it will be available on Friday for all the rest of our lovely listeners. One of the things that we learned was that a lot of concerns have been raised with the FSA about competitive fixtures ending up being played abroad, particularly in America. And it seems that for some of Europe's top clubs, Kieran, that idea is moving closer.
It is. This is on the back of a decision which has been made by UEFA. Following the threat of Super League, UEFA set up a joint venture with leading clubs, the leading clubs of the European Club Association, and this was called UC3. And the job of UC3 was to try to maximise the money which is generated by UEFA competitions. The view was taken is, if we can get an extra 30, 40, 50% of broadcast money coming in to UEFA's competition, the incentive for the owners of the sneaky Super League clubs to go and form their own competition diminishes because they realise, well, actually, we're probably not going to make much more money anyway, so why not just go and, it's better the devil you know, as Kylie once said. And I don't think she was involved in this. So what UEFA did was they have had for a period of around about 30 years an organisation called Team Marketing. Now, Team Marketing, I think, is broadly based in Switzerland. And it's sort of what you might call old school. And it had a very tight relationship, and its responsibility was to sell the global rights of UEFA competition. So and I picked up this story from our very good friend, Matt Slater. But there's an upstart, and like many upstarts, it's based in New York, and it's a company called Relevant Sports. And rather irritatingly, it's Relevant is spelt with 2 E's.
Oh,
yeah, I know. Yeah. 3 E's, even worse. Oh. And they have now been awarded the rights to market UEFA's competitions starting in 2027. And what we know about Relevant Sports is historically they've been organising matches, I think the International Cup competition in the United States. And I think the concern is that, to a certain extent, if they start to make these proposals, that given that the NFL, NBA, and so on has more than exhibition, it has actual league matches, competitive matches taking place in European markets, as a quid pro quo, should the Premier League therefore play matches overseas? They don't have the deal with the Premier League yet, but they now do have a deal with UEFA. Alexander Seferin, who is the chair of UEFA, doesn't appear to be opposed to this. It has been suggested that a Champions League final taking place in the United States would generate huge amounts of money. And we know just how much money the Super Bowl has generated itself. How America would react to suggestions that the Super Bowl final should take place in Real is something I've, United States, it seems very much these days to be, do as I say, not as I do, when it comes to hypocrisy. But La Liga are keen. El Clasico was mooted a few years ago, and at the time, FIFA's rules prevented that. Well, FIFA has relaxed its rules. Certainly, there are parties within La Liga that would be keen on this. Seferin appears to be keen on this. Al Khalifa, who is the head of PSG, appears to be saying there is a direction of travel coming not from football fans in Europe, but football executives and club owners, that this is a way to generate more money. And therefore, once it's happening in UEFA, it then potentially happens with La Liga. And what we will hear from the Premier League is, well, we don't want to do it, but we need to be competitive with La Liga. So therefore, reluctantly, we'll have matches in the United States. And if you're going to have matches in the United States, I think it's only right and proper that if you go to international matches, you end up going to the highest bidder, regardless of where that higher bidder is.
Yeah, imagine how Donald Trump would be pleased if a Russian team got into the final of the Champions League that was played in New York. He'd be at that game.
Oh, he'd be made up. It'd be his home team, wouldn't it, these days?
Talking of the highest bidder, Kieran, do you know how much Relevance paid for the rights for this?
I'm not. I think their job is to sell packages. I think they were initially given the job of selling packages in the United States, and I think CBS has paid an absolute fortune for Champions League matches. So on the back of that, UEFA and US UC3 have been so impressed by Relevant, they've said, well, if you've done such a good job in the United States, now go and do the same job in Asian markets, African markets, and so on.
Worth saying, I think, Kieran, that as far as I know, anecdotally, from American friends and family of mine, that American broadcasters do actually cover the Premier League very well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, keep broadcasting it then. There.
Yeah. You remember at the start of the show, Kieran, we were happily reminiscing about the old days when we would have a Crawley Town story and a Derby County story. In those days, Kieran, we hadn't heard of Dazn. Dazn is what you got into before a show, Kieran. Used to watch you pacing up and down the ring like Jake LaMotta, but now here we have two stories about Dazn, one of which involves. Again, I wish I could think of another word for eye-wateringly, but eye-wateringly large amount of money.
Yes. So we're going to start off with what's happening in France.
Yeah.
The head of French football was trying to sell French TV rights at the start of the year for €1 billion. And everybody said, nah, not interested. So they ended up selling a sort of panic deal with Dazn, I think for around about €500 million, which was a big financial hit for French football clubs. But Dazn have not paid the most recent instalment, which was 70 million. Yeah, they pay amounts during the year. They say they've got the cash, so they by all accounts have put the money into an escrow account, effectively a watertight account. So the French football authorities can see that the money is there, but it's not yet going to them. And the reason for this is that in the view of Dazn, the LFP, the French football authorities, have done close to zero to prevent piracy. Now, I don't know what the French equivalent of a Big Dave down the pub is with a dodgy fire stick, but clearly there's an awful lot of them, hiding them in baguettes or God knows where else. And for Dazn to have broken even in France, they would have needed 1.5 million subscribers. They've only got around about a third of that, and partly due to the quality of the product, partly due to their. If you think about where French football was a couple of years ago, you had Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe all playing for Paris Saint-Germain. Yeah. Who's the most high-profile football player in France at present? I think you'd struggle to name. So French football is also paying sort of the historical issues of having PSG dominate French football for so long, which means that the degree of interest elsewhere is lower. French football, professional football, is different to that of football here in the UK, which we are used to having. You think about the size of London and how many big clubs there are. Just in the Premier League itself, you've got Spurs, Arsenal, West Ham, Palace, Fulham, and so on. Chelsea. Brentford. So, it's a big city can support an awful lot of football clubs. Well, that's not the case in France. You've only got sort of a couple of clubs at most per one city, and in practically every one of them, it's going to be one town, one club. And on the back of that, the interest has waned. You then drop down into Ligue 2, the second tier of French football, and they've signed a TV deal with beIN Sports. And as part of that deal, all of the matches, or I think 7 out of 8 matches, which are being televised live each week, have now been shifted from Saturdays to Friday nights.
Oh,
French football fans, Friday nights are not for football as far as they are concerned.
Yeah.
So there's been boycotts. They're using what we might call guerrilla warfare in the shape of their shining lasers at the beIN cameras. The broadcast trucks are being sabotaged when they come to grounds. They're lobbing tennis balls on matches. They are having banners which are less than complimentary about some of the people involved in the deal. And again, I don't want to be accused of racial stereotyping here, but they enjoy a protest in France, as many people who've tried to get back on a ferry Their farmers enjoy a good blockade and so on. And French football fans have taken up a similar arms.
I don't know how anyone who could suggest that the French were hiding their fire sticks in baguettes could be accused of racial stereotyping, Kieran. Really? I don't know why you didn't go the whole hog and say they put the others under their beret and they got little strings of onions and fire sticks as they cycle through the streets of Paris. Just maybe the idea of the 13 Frenchman sticking his fire, the French gendarme saying, I cannot find this fire stick anywhere.
We've gone full low, haven't we?
I'm not touching his baguette is sacrosanct. I'm not looking in his. I apologise to all our French listeners. I know we have many of them. Well, if Dazn are worried about the money they're not getting from France, Kieran, they don't have to worry anymore because they're getting a lot from Saudi Arabia.
In the court of amazing coincidences. And we've been trailing this. We said this is what's going to happen for a long period of time.
Yeah.
There's been a general perception that nobody in their right minds was going to pay the asking fee to FIFA for the Club World Cup, which is taking place this summer. I think you'd struggle to name more than a handful of clubs that are participating. I won't be collecting Panini stickers for this one, as I suspect there'll be a general boycott from grumpy old blokes like me, having nothing to do with it. But FIFA have committed to large payouts from this, and they needed to get a very lucrative, they were looking for, I think, a $1 billion TV deal. Up steps Dazn. Now, if you take a look at Dazn's accounts, and they are on my company's accounts list, by the way, of course, as you can imagine, you'll find that as an organisation, it's losing a lot of money. So where are they getting this cash from? And all of a sudden, the Saudi investment fund has just agreed to pay $1 billion.
Wow.
Has that number come up in this conversation before? For a 10% stake.
Wow.
So now we've got what you might call I'm conscious that we've got to be slightly more professional today. I'll describe it as a circularity. When we started the show, I'd have called it something else, but we've got a circularity in terms of the relationship. FIFA will benefit from hosting the Saudi World Cup, the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has indirectly come to the rescue of FIFA in 2025 from providing the funding to Dazn to allow them to pay the $1 billion asking fee for the broadcast rights. So everybody goes away smiling. What a fantastic deal for all concerned.
So you can be as cynical as you like, and there's always a possibility that the Saudi investment fund looked at Dazn and thought, look at the sort of money they're making out of the French Ligue 2. We want a slice of that, actually. But also, this values Dazn at $10 billion, which... maybe
a loss-making business. Yeah, and when you value a business, you value it on future success. But they've got some niche. They can get done quite well on boxing and other bits and pieces. But $10 billion. That's a good price. That I'll take that.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pup, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
So good, so good, so good.
Get ready, because it's time to save at your Nordstrom Rack store. Now through February 23rd, take an extra 40% off red tag clearance boots, jackets, and sweaters. We're talking the best cold weather styles from Vince, Cole Haan, Sam Edelman, and more. All on sale for even less. All sales final. You never know what you'll find, but you know it's gonna be so good. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
It's been a good few weeks for Everton fans, Kieran. Annoyingly good last Saturday. It's been a good time for the club. They're moving into what it looks like, I have to say, Kieran, from the VTs and the photos I've seen, an incredible new stadium. But it looks like they're going to be kicking off their first game in the new stadium in the Premier League, obviously, but possibly with a new front of shirt sponsor, Kieran.
Yes, this is because Everton's front of shirt partner, stake.com, is giving up its license in the UK. And I don't want to go down this route particularly. This is all to do with a porn stunt involving some OnlyFans. I don't really understand how these things work. Some OnlyFans starlet who had some sort of live stream, some very awful event where the stake.com logo was given prominence. And the Gambling Commission said, you can't do this. You cannot be seen to be using sexual activity to promote gambling. And therefore, it said to Stake, you need to sort yourself out. And Stake's response, and Stake, which describes itself as the world's leading crypto casino, so you've got two chances to lose your money there, crypto or the casino, has decided that it's going to stop its book in the UK from the 11th of March. It does have limited opportunities to gamble, to be fair, on its book in the UK, because it is what we refer to as a white label gambling company, and there are many of those connected to football clubs. And for people unfamiliar, there is a company called TGP Europe, which is located in the heart of Europe, the Isle of Man, and TGP Europe manages to get licenses for gambling companies in the UK, and on the back of that, they can then potentially have these relationships with football clubs. The Gambling Commission has also written to Nottingham Forest and Leicester City to say your sponsors also appear to, they've not gone down as something as grotesque as what we've seen here. Your sponsors are white label as well. You don't appear to have opened a book in the UK, so why are you advertising on the front of UK football shirts? So it does seem complex. Everton, however, have said, well, we're not intending to cease our relationship with stake.com. Yeah, they paid the instalments. This is independent, but it certainly doesn't present the gambling company in a particularly good light. But like most of these things, we're now living in a world where people are just so brazen about it. They just say, well, tough, we'll move on. We'll make a minimal adjustment to our position in the UK, and we will continue to use Everton as a vehicle to advertise our services.
I say this as a supporter of a club who's got net 88 emblazoned across the front of our shirt. I don't even, who knows who they are. But I'm sure most Everton fans will be thinking, start of next season, got new owners, got a new ground. Let's get a less shonky name on the front of our wonderful traditional blue shirts. Really, I just think the club owe it to their fans to be a little bit more classy front of shirt when they're getting classier everywhere else. Even though we will all miss Goodison Park.
Yeah,
as indeed will all Everton fans until they find themselves in a seat where they can see the whole pitch and get in and out quite easily. We've finished with three stories about smaller clubs, Kieran, but before that we saw demonstrations at I'm still going to call it White Hart Lane, Kieran, for the sake of...
That's because it is White Hart Lane.
Because it is White Hart Lane, yeah. But we saw Tottenham fans demonstrating with the optimistic intent of getting rid of Daniel Levy from the club on Sunday. And they may have got quite excited when they heard there was a new consortium looking to buy the club But it doesn't look like that means Daniel Levy will be saying bye-bye at any moment soon.
That's right. I think it's fair to say that Tottenham are seen by many people in the investment arena as being in play. They are owned by ENIC, who've got absolutely nothing to do with Joe Lewis. Has to be stressed.
No, of course.
Never heard of him. What's going to happen to the shares owned by ENIC? We don't know. But Amanda Staveley's name has been mentioned in terms of putting together a consortium of investors or getting a direct investment from Qatar. And just going back to our French story, there's been a fallout between Al Khalifa and I think some of the French legal authorities. So could Qatar be pulling out of Paris, given the travails of French football? The Premier League is very much the place to be seen. So if that is the case, I think Daniel Levy owns around about 27, 28% of Spurs. He is a Spurs fan, and I think he would like to continue to have a very senior role. And it could be similar to what we are seeing at Crystal Palace. Steve Parish, as a Brighton fan, we don't have a jibe, but we all acknowledge that Steve Parish is a Palace fan.
Yeah.
And he's dedicated to the club in that regard. He only owns 10%, but he's the guy that runs the club on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So if Spurs is acquired, could it be that you've got new owners with a bigger checkbook, but you keep Daniel as chairman, and he keeps his stake, or he sells part of his stake and still has, let's say, a nominal 10%. And that way, all parties and all egos could be satisfied. Spurs fans are critical of Daniel Levy. He has created the most profitable business in the history of the Premier League, but that's not why you fall in love with football. And I think trying to reconcile those issues has been a complication over recent years. Because Spurs fans, Daniel Levy expects Spurs fans to pay some of the highest prices for tickets, both season tickets and match day tickets. And we're just talking about Goodison. Well, Spurs is a magnificent stadium from watching a match point of view. Bramley Moor Dock did have a sort of a ramp-up match, I think, in front of 10,000 a couple of nights ago. And by all accounts, I know a couple of people who went who just get it. Yes, we're going to miss Goodison, but we can't wait to move. Everybody's got such a positive approach to it.
Yeah. A reasonably short walk from Spurs to Leyton Orient, Kieran, which I know from experience. We've seen some cracking goals recently, Kieran. I mean, your goal against Chelsea, that astonishing piece of control. But I would argue that the best goal of the year so far was the Leyton Orient goal against Man City in the FA Cup. Certainly the most exciting. And all those idiots who are still trying to say, well, it was an own goal, wasn't it? Went in off the keeper. You need to stop going to football. People who think that's an own goal, give up your season ticket, find something else to go to. But whether or not that goal put Leyton Orient in the shop window, I don't know, Kieran, but it seems that they are in takeover talks.
Yes, they were acquired about 5 or 6 years ago by the guy that used to run Krispy Kreme donuts.
Yeah.
And I think he's now realised that it's a tough, expensive business, and the club is in the shop window. Again, what are the attractions? It's in London, which is great for international investors. It's a club with history and heritage. You and I can both remember going back 30, 40 years when Orient used to be in the second tier, for example.
Yeah.
And a day out in Orient was fantastic. It was one of the ones you'd always look forward to. So it does appear that they are putting themselves out. I said that Spurs are in play in the sense that they're not touting themselves to be sold, but at the same time, they're not rejecting anybody that knocks on the door and says, "Psst, Fancy a sale. So I think they are more open about the position, and it would be a very good acquisition. In terms of the price involved, I don't know the exact position with regards to the stadium, but you're not talking tens and tens of millions. You might go, high singles, low teens at the very, very most.
Yeah, it's got decent transport links as well. It's a good ground, decent fan base, passionate fan base, mainly passionate about being patronised by every other team in London, because every other football team in London, he's mentioned Leyton Orient, everyone goes, bless them. We all I don't know anybody who doesn't dislike or doesn't like Leyton Orient. Never mind. You get my drift. Our last two stories, Kieran, are unfortunately distressingly close to the old school price of football. Two clubs who are struggling. The first is Blythe Spartans.
Yes, and Kevin Miles will be going out on the Friday show, so there'll be tomorrow, I think, for the vast majority of listeners. Kevin's now associated with Blythe Spartans, and I was looking at their website, and they said we've been spending a bit too much money historically, so there has been a change at the top, but at the same time, the club and people in the Northeast talk about Blythe Spartans because it has been the start point for so many successful careers in Northeast football and then on to broader markets as well. But they've been paying too much out in wages recently, and it's come back to bite them. So the new owners, I think they put in £90,000 themselves, but they probably need about another $100,000 to get to the end of the season. And because it's in non-league, I think player contracts expire at the end of April. And from what I understand, I've looked at the numbers, they need to have a bit of a reset. But if they can get that $100,000 to last them to the end of the season, it will then give them the opportunity to recruit new players, or to say to the existing players, we can offer you a contract, but we can't pay you as much due to this is the cost of running the club. But they've got to get to the end of the season first, and they're effectively putting out a please can you help me? And there are many successful people in the Northeast. It would be fantastic if some of the more senior teams in the area could, even if it sending an under-18s for an exhibition match for a Wednesday night, because they can cram in. I think it would be welcome, and I think it would sell out. And Newcastle fans are such brilliant fans, is that they'd turn up to watch that as well if it was Newcastle United. So I'm hoping that this will have a successful resolution.
Well, also, if any of the Newcastle owners are listening to this, we can find a way of bugging Blythe Spartans $100,000. Surely we can. If you want to get round the regulations, have a word with Kieran. He'll find a way to get the Blythe Spartans the money you need. Because this is a club, Kieran, not only famous in the Northeast, but back in the day, this was a non-league club famous across the whole of English football. Famous giant-killing team. Always getting into amateur cup finals, going to Wimbledon. So this is a team. All teams need saving, Kieran, not just Blythe Spartans.
Exactly.
Which brings us to Farsley Celtic, Kieran, which is a team probably neither of us had really heard of until about 6 weeks ago, and suddenly they're all over the place now, aren't they? In more ways than one, unfortunately.
Yes. So we're recording this on Wednesday morning, and I think it was 5:00 last night up on the Farsley Celtic website. And I do get alerts for all of these things, that something came through to me to say they've had problems with trying to work out whether they wanted a grass pitch or a 3G pitch, and that's been messy. They had an owner who fell out with anybody that he could fall out with. People come in sometimes with good intentions, and they realise that football materializes into something different to their expectations. So they are underfunded, and again, it's a case of can they? Their results have been poor. I know last night they lost 2-0 at home, I think it was. It's again, if something can be done from people in the local area or more senior clubs, and you can help out in a variety of ways, I'm sure they'll be very grateful. And the important thing is that clubs learn from this, because there'll be many clubs there saying, "There for the grace of God go I," and who are reliant upon local business folk to subsidise the losses. There's still a sort of an existential issue in terms of poor cost control within football.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page, and everyone who has now joined the brand new Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join the club too, go to our website, priceoffootball.com. You'll get all sorts of extra benefits for a couple of quid a month. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, X. You can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy one of our excellent books, it says here, guys added the word excellent, I would have taken that as read. Or even that Price of Football t-shirt, you can find all the details on our website, priceoffootball.com. We will be back on Friday with that Kevin Miles interview, and then we'll be back on Tuesday with our next Questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you to all of you that have joined the Price of Football Club, and we'll be having a chat with you. I'm in a position to confirm our next gig.
Ooh,
we
great.
are going to New York, Kevin.
We are.
It's the New York Stadium in Rotherham.
Good enough for me.
Which is about as close as we'll probably ever get. I think that is the 30th of April.
It is.
We're really looking forward to it. So if you're in South Yorkshire, I believe Rotherham is starting to market tickets now. Come along. It will be broadly similar to sort of the two pods that we do. So we'll be discussing some of the topical issues. We will be trying to negotiate to get a guest or two to talk about South Yorkshire football in particular, and then a Q&A with the audience. And I will be alarmingly indiscreet.
Yeah, you don't have to be in South Yorkshire. You can travel.
Yes, absolutely.
There's other ridings. You can come from the other ridings and various different parts of the world. It'll be lovely to see you all, as always. What's this? Oh, I've done them in Mimo. Oh, this is the least professional ending of a pod we've ever done, Kieran. Bye.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.